Okay, we're back at the home of Crybaby Performance, where we try and they cry. Okay, so we're going to move on to the cylinder head. I'm going to get my assistant Jake to help me. Now this is more involved tech. You got to take the heat shield off. Again, bag that, somebody. And you gotta take the valve cover off to get at the head bolts. And we gotta get this throttle linkage off here that's holding the head on. Okay, we're going to page 19 in the manual for people that are following along in the manual. Page 19. Cylinder head, head gasket, valves, spring retainers, springs, rocker arms, and studs. The Thailand TKI and the ATA series cylinder head are the only approved heads for use on the Honda UT3. Okay, and this says Z4H TKI-1. Okay, that's legal. Remove the cylinder head and then check the head gasket. Millimeter. Should be out already. Well, we could check max lift, but we could check that later when we do the cam. An easy way to check max lift right here, but we're going to be doing it again later, so I don't want to bore everybody to death, but you have the bolts for this and we'll just show them real quick. This is a tool that bolts onto the cylinder head, and this tool holds a dial indicator on the top of the retainer for the valve. And when you spin the engine over, the needle goes up or down. Well, it won't go down, it's only going to go up. And then you can check the max lift off of the retainer. But since we're going to check it a different way off the actual camshaft, we'll show you that later. Okay, remove cylinder head. You can use an impact to take it apart. Don't use one to put it together. Okay, so I like to label stuff as I take it apart, so I know the push rod. This is the intake. And I draw at the top of it an I, and then I know it's the intake. They're supposed to be the same length, so it doesn't really matter. And then I put an E on that one for exhaust. Again, we're going to measure the overall length with our long caliper. When you put the head back on, you want to use a torque wrench, and you can look up the specs on Honda what it's torqued to. I don't know it off the top of my head, but the head should be torqued back on. It's not a big deal taking it off. Okay, there's There's our head. And we know it's a UT3 because the intake valve is a lot bigger than the UT2 intake valve. And this is one of the biggest reasons that a UT2 will no longer keep up with a UT3 because of the amount of air you're getting into this motor. You're taking a lot more air in with that bigger valve. Okay. So now we're going to go to the head gasket. 8 thousandths minimum. Now they want you, minimum is 8? Yep. Of inner rim. Okay, the inner rim is right here is what they're talking about. Steel shim style is the only legal head gasket. And if you can read that, it's 11 thousandths. And this is a steel shim head gasket because it's steel and it's like shim material. I've reused these. I can't even tell you how many times, and they've never leaked. As long as it has this little bump out around it, it's not going to leak. And it has a bump out on either side and a bump out here. It's not going to leak. Okay, now you're on to the cylinder head. The casting and all machining must be exactly as produced by Honda. Except head gasket surface can be milled. Okay, so we're gonna look at that head gasket. The minimum cylinder head thickness is 2.938. The thickness of the head will be measured from the valve cover surface to the head gasket surface on the side at a position in line with the upper intake and exhaust flange bolt. Upper intake, exhaust flange bolt. You come around to the front. .944. 2.938. So that is a legal cylinder head. 3/8 to 4/4 is 4/6. So technically you could take 6 thousandths off the bottom of that. Well, really 7 with their new rule of plus or minus. Right. But you know, really, if it comes in spec, that's not going to make or break this engine to be fast or not.
No, just to clarify, can you use a UT2 head on a UT3 motor?
No, you cannot use a UT2 head on a UT3 motor. The UT2 head has a much smaller combustion chamber, and it's going to have more compression ratio if you use a UT2 head. For your mini bike, sure, but for quarter midget racing, no. How about for your lawnmower? Cut the grass faster. Could do that. Okay, so, and now we're going to look inside of the port. To make sure that that's the factory finish. I don't know, can you see in there? Am I tilting it right? Must not be modified. What's that?
Tilt it down a little more.
There you go.
No addition or subtraction of material. Can you see in there?
A little bit down, and then get the flashlight in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to see, but the factory finish is like a shiny finish. If somebody was porting in here or sandblasting in there, you would absolutely see it in that port. Now the exhaust port is a little bit harder to distinguish because it's black, it's covered with carbon, and you would have to see big grind marks in there to distinguish if somebody was in there. But this head, I can tell by looking at it that it's the factory head. it's not been messed with.
Okay, the valve seats must be produced with one 45-degree angle. Okay, let's talk about that. Oh, you can't see me popping those off.
Okay, so to take the valves out, I just popped it off because I was behind the engine and wasn't thinking. Okay, I'm holding the valve with my finger back here. It's only a 16-pound valve spring. So if I push both down and move that keeper, it's going to come right back off. And the problem is, at the track, when you're trying to change valve springs, you don't have your thumb back here to hold this, to push down on the valve spring. So it makes it a little more difficult. And I've seen people, and I've done it too, where they take a awl and they put it down and they hold the valve. You can hold this one, you can hold that one. And then you can get the valve off the, to change the valve spring at the racetrack. Now the thing is, to give yourself a little bit of insurance, I would have the piston at top dead center. Get me a piston. So the piston is that far away from the head, okay, in real life, in the engine. So let's say you forget to hold that valve. You can pop that spring off, but then the valve itself is going to drop down and it's going to hit the piston, which is fine. You just saved your day and you went, woohoo! Okay, because if this piston was down here in the cylinder, and you took that spring off, now the valve is going to drop through and hit the piston, and then you're not going to see the tip of the valve any longer because it's going to be down here, and you're going to go, uh-oh. Now, we all make mistakes. I make them too, and I did that once. And then I had to take a little pick and look through the hole and line it up ever so slightly and rotate the motor to get the valve to go up through the port. And that was in between races, so you can imagine how panicked I was, and your hand's shaking and you're trying to get this thing back together. So, but you don't learn a lesson like that until you do it. And when you do it wrong, you'll never forget to do it again. But anyhow, that's how you would change valve springs at the racetrack. Now, what were we looking to do? We're going to take...
Valve seats must be as produced, one 45-degree angle. Compound angles on valve seats will not be permitted.
Okay, so this is the exhaust valve. This is usually your problem valve. Okay, the intake valve is pulling in a cool air mixture. Okay, so this valve, even though it's in the same port, it's running a cooler temperature than the exhaust valve. And the exhaust valve has the burnt exhaust gases and whatever leakage we're getting from oil. That's why this is black. If this was burning 100% clean, it would not be black. That's carbon on there. So what happens is the carbon from the valve going up and down, the carbon builds up on the face of the valve. Okay, and I can see that the face of this valve, if we can zoom in, you can see the fine line of where it's running. Okay, so that valve's in pretty good shape.
Hold it up so we can see it a little bit.
Can you see it now? The fine line around there means that valve, and a lot of people don't know this, but when this engine is running, this valve is turning in the engine. It's not staying in the same position. It's turning in the engine. Every time it goes up and down, it turns a little, turns a little, turns a little. Okay, so it's wearing on that seat. Okay, the exhaust valve gets very hot, and the exhaust valve is what's usually leaking, not the intake valve. Okay.
That's worth a couple tenths when that's leaking real bad.
Now they're going to give us an overall valve length.
Intake valve length?
Exhaust.
Exhaust valve length 2.461 / 2.475.
2.482. Okay, so that valve is 2.4828887. So it's plenty long enough.
It's longer than allowed technically.
It's longer than allowed. Now, let's say you'd have to lap this valve over and over and over. Well, that ain't going to change the length of it. That's the Honda length, 2.47686. I mean, you got to really study
they're
this.
calling it 2.475, so it's a thou.
It's 5 thousandths. They're giving you 5 thousandths, which ain't much.
Well, they should extend that a couple because that one's a little long.
Yeah, well, it's fine. Then they're giving you the diameter of the valve,
2.12.
7.48.
Oh. Valve face diameter 7.744 to 5.2.
Okay, so 4.4 to 5.2, we're at 4.4. That valve is in spec. There's nothing wrong with that valve.
Valve stem diameter.
Now this sometimes wears in the seat, in the head. And this is at 213.
Minimum 212 to
Okay,
216.
so
It's
213, that's in spec. But I mean, if this engine had a lot of miles on it, I mean, that could wear that. I mean, but it would take a lot of miles. Okay, so now we're going to go to the intake valve, which is pretty much
same thing. Measurements.
okay. As you can see on the intake port, it's a lot cleaner. It's not as dirty and doesn't have carbon in it. So that valve usually stays better for the sealing surface. And we can look at that valve and we can just see where it's sealing right there. That's actually a nice looking valve. Sometimes you get them where the valve seat is not in a good position, it's up higher, and you want the intake to open as soon as it can to draw as much fuel. Okay, so we're going to measure
The length 2.44 minimum.
2.53, it's like almost 10 over.
Yeah, it's fine.
The bell,
We're on page 20 in the manual to page 21. Face diameter 0.978 to 986.
okay, and it's 985.
They weigh it to 21 grams.
Oh, let's weigh it.
21 grams minimum. The other one was 16 grams minimum.
So I like to weigh all these parts too because I'm curious where they get some of these numbers from. And then we're going to check the valve spring tension. Now I have this U-line scale that I bought, and it's got to go through its paces to be happy.
Can you see it?
Can you see that in the camera?
If the screen's off, if the light is off, yeah. That's alright.
Okay,
You
so
can make it out.
can you see it?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, so it's zeroed, and we're gonna put the intake valve on there, and it's 22.8, what are they giving us?
21 grams minimum.
So 1.2 grams, I mean, you're not gonna get that off of this valve. That's just not gonna happen.
Okay, here, 16
You know.
grams on this one.
17.8, so it's the same 1.8.
So they're legal.
So they're legal, and I wouldn't mess with them. I don't think there's anything to be gained for what it is.
All right, page 21, we're on valve spring retainer.
Now they're measuring the thickness of the retainer. Right there, which is 0.084.
Well, the intake one is 0.230 minimum. What's that thing?
0.084.
I don't see that number. Oh, measurement of the flat of the flange to the machine surface, 0.148.
Overall thickness of the valve spring retainer will be 0.230. Overall thickness. Okay, so they're measuring the whole thickness of the retainer. 2.35. Flange thickness. They're saying maximum 100 thousandths. This is at 835.
Yeah, they jumbled it. Minimum, then maximum, then back to minimum.
And you're allowed a 30,000 shim under the exhaust or the intake valve. It's pretty hard to see. There's a shim in here. Jake, can you get me a valve seal so I can show them? There's the shim. It's loose now. It's usually 30 thousandths. Okay, so now we'll get into more of a fun tech on it.
So the head's good.
Okay, they're saying that this valve seal right here, which goes over the valve onto the cylinder head, that is illegal. That comes in the stock motor, and they want you to take that out. That's it used to be a race day DQ. I don't know if they're calling it still valve seal race day DQ. Okay, but they're saying that you can use this thickness of this washer underneath the spring, but it can't have the valve seal part on it. So I guess you could knock that rubber seal out, but you can buy shims in different thicknesses from NR Racing, and they're allowing you a shim that's 30 thousandths thick, which what that'll do is that'll compress the spring a little bit more and give you more spring pressure. So you want to take advantage of that 30 thousandths spring. Okay, now the next part is we want to measure the spring rate. It says valve springs. We're on page 21. We're going to have to go over to the vise, but I'm going to explain what we're doing. The 140 valve spring on page 22 is what you want.
So just skip right over the 120 because nobody cares. You don't want to use that anyways.
And this is an easy tech too. If if you have to do a valve spring or whatever, it says the wire diameter is 79 thousandths. It's 77.5.
That's a max.
Maximum.
Outside diameter max, 0.816 of the whole thing.
811. You know, coils 7. Count the coils 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I mean, let's go a little faster. This is a Honda spring. I don't know why you'd want to use an aftermarket spring. These springs are so cheap. You know, this is the part number 14751ZE1.
So this is the legal valve spring for this engine. Now these valve springs have been run, so we're going to show you what they measure. It says spring pressure 16 pounds at 812. So what they want is they want 812 on my caliper, which that's 812.5. So I lock that down. They want us to compress this spring to 812 and then measure it. So how we're going to do that is, this is our spring compressor tool, and we're going to put it in the vise with the spring, and then we're going to collapse this spring to 812 on the caliper and see what it reads on the gauge.
This one's going to be interesting.
But we got to do it here at the vise.
We got to do a quick little setup, but I'm not going to tell you the ending of this, but you're going to want to stay tuned. So give us a 10-second break here to get set up. We'll be right back with you. Go to the bathroom, and we'll be right back to test the springs.
Welcome back to Crybaby Performance. We try, they cry. The power is in the knowledge. Power is in the engine too, but knowledge is power. So we have our gauge right here, and we have our spring in the vise, and we're measuring from the vise jaws to the top of the face of here. That's the 812 number. They're looking for this spring to be compressed to 812.
Page 22 in the manual if you're following along.
22 in the manual. Now, if you look at the gauge, it's 15, it's 16, it's a titch over 16. The rule says 16.
That's a used valve spring?
That's a used valve spring. I don't know how many runs this engine has on it, but by the looks of it, it has quite a few. So now that I have the vise and everything set, I can take the tool out.
Well, that one that was at 16.1.
16.1. Okay, just hold on. Now we have a brand new valve spring out of the wrapper. Part number . Now we have our brand new valve spring, and now we're going to check 812 again, because things move a little bit. There's 812. And we're at 15, 16, 17, 18 and a half. So tell me how the rule can be 16 when I have a valve spring. It's their part number, they call it out at 18 and a half. DQ. Now, if I didn't, you know, if the tech guy wasn't versed and didn't really know this stuff, okay, you could put brand new valve springs in, run a feature race, they check valve springs, and you're most likely over that 16, and you're going to get DQ'd. But you did nothing wrong. This is the valve spring that's called out. You did nothing wrong. And you'd be standing there going, what? I didn't do anything wrong. Well, this is a used valve spring, and they lose valve spring tension over time, but the rule really should read 18 and a half or 19, And that should be the rule. This is clear as day. I can't believe they didn't change it in the book, but
Well, even 16.1 is a DQ.
right. So, and I've seen this time and time again, but what are you going to do? That technically somebody could DQ you over that. If you didn't have this tool, which I have it at the track, I bring all my stuff to the track in case we got to go to tech. Then I got to fight for my life because I know the rules and I know what the parts are. So, okay, that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, so now we're on to, we're gonna take a 5-second break to switch back to the other table.
Okay, we're back at the home of Crybaby Performance. If you say that really fast, it could be a tongue twister. And it's where we try and they cry. So, we're gonna check right now is, if you could get more air to flow through this cylinder head, you could pick up a little bit of power. But the rules say that you really shouldn't be able to get more air through there. So, they're having us check this valve guide right here. Can you see that? The how deep it is from the top of this to the valve guide. Now, if you had a punch made and you hit it in, you could move that valve guide down a little bit, which would get more air into the engine. Okay, and the same with the exhaust one. It's really hard to see because it's black and carbon in there. But there's a measurement for those valve guides. Can you find that for me? Now we take this flat bar and then my caliper again. If I take my caliper like that, it says 1250 and I zero it, now it's zeros. But if I measure that, now I'm going to have to do math, and I don't want to do math. So I'll hold it there, and I'll hit 0. Now it's taking in consideration that length of that bar. Now we're going to measure down to the valve guide. Which measures 858. But these guys are looking for that dimension. It's going to be under valve guide.
Measure from head deck surface down to top of valve seat. Intake and exhaust. The minimum is 238. The maximum is 260.
Okay, where are they measuring from?
Head deck surface down to top of valve seat.
What page number?
Page number 20.
That's what it did. Why is it so? It can't be 0.238. Oh, there it is, guide. Okay, measure from the head deck surface to the top of the valve guide, intake and exhaust. Maximum,
925.
why aren't they giving us a minimum? Maximum, 925. Oh. Am I thinking about that right?
I got a question when we get
865. But it's given a maximum, not a minimum.
Yeah, but if you push that seat down, you're sucking more air through.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
why they're giving a maximum, not a minimum. Because if you push that up, it doesn't matter. So that valve guide, you could push that valve guide high.
No. Let's see if it's from this side. That's the side. Okay, you're measuring from the valve cover to the valve guide. And they're giving, what? 925 maximum. And that's measuring 1.013. So it's like 925, 9.25.
Maximum.
Intake and exhaust, max. Measure from head deck surface.
The bottom side.
Oh, but now they're giving you down to
That's-
lowest machine area of the ball. And take an exhaust port diameter. Sometimes these rules, man, you gotta really study them to get what they're talking about, because there's very little pictures in here. Measure from the head deck surface down to the top of the valve seat. That's not what we want. Measure valve, top of the valve guide. Measure from the head deck surface to the top of the valve guide. Head deck, top of exhaust guide. And then it says maximum. What did it say in the old book?
235 to 250 max. And they changed it to 238 to 260.
He's talking about this one.
Oh, they didn't change it. The 925?
This one's 859.
So it's under the maximum.
Yeah, it's under the maximum. It's good.
It's good.
Okay, so it's under the maximum. I had to think in reverse. So if you push that in, then that number is going to go up, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then you would be over. So 60. Let's see. I'm doing math in my head. 925.
60 thousandths.
So that's like 60 thousandths
It's a lot.
that somebody could. Oh, I know why it didn't read right. Oh no, it read right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, just to show you, that's 60 thousandths that valve guide you're giving up. It could be tunked down 60 thousandths to meet their maximum number.
I'll take it.
What was your question, Eric?
They were just wondering about the UT2 differences between the UT3. I know we're covering the UT3 now.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the cylinder head. There is, now this is another important one because they make these rocker arms in different lengths, shorter and longer, which affects the valve, the max lift. So can you guys find me that dimension? And again, you would never, I mean, to do all this tech at the racetrack is, I mean, you can see how much we struggle on some of these numbers and the part.
And we don't have 30 people standing around all.
And I do this a lot. They used to give a length of the rocker arm.
Rocker arm, push rods, rocker arm stud.
Rocker arm.
Valve lift is intake 245 maximum.
Yeah, I want the length of the rocker arm.
Well, you just asked for that. That's why I said
Oh.
that.
Page 22 is rocker arms, but I'm not seeing a length.
Oh, there's no length?
It could be, they jumble stuff around.
Okay, let me get my other caliper and we'll do length of push rod.
That's in here. Push rod length, 4.790.
Yeah, you just gotta put a battery in it.
Let's see, I got the old manual, 22.
The only thing it says about the rocker arms is that Honda factory supplied rocker arms must be used without any modification.
Okay, so if that's the case, they should have a length of this rocker arm. I thought it was in there. You could go blind looking at these manuals because you can buy these rocker arms in different lengths, longer or shorter. And Honda, if it says Honda supplied rocker arm, you know, they make a GX200 and a GX160. So, you know, I've never messed with it, so I don't know, but, you know, food for thought. Okay, now we're going to measure the length of the push rod, which you need a longer caliper.
4.790.
Page 22, 4.790.
.774.
That's under the max, yeah. That'd be a legal push rod.
So that's legal.
That's legal.
Okay, give me the other one. .776. 76 and 74. So they're 2,000s different. That's not enough to matter.
They're both legal. They're under the maximum.
Right. Okay, we're gonna take a break. We're done with the cylinder head, unless we missed something in the book, but I don't think we did.
What are we doing next here?
We're going to measure. We're going to do cam timing next.
Cam timing. The most power gain you can get out of this motor is cam timing. You want to stay tuned for cam timing.
We're gonna clean off the bench.